Good afternoon to you, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for August 17th, 2015. Let's start off with the sea surface temperature anomalies around the Western Hemisphere. You notice pretty easily here the El Nino in the tropical Pacific along the equatorial region. And I think it stands to reason that you can pretty easily point out this area here in the North Pacific also quite a bit warmer than it should be. And all of this warmer overall than the Atlantic is. And so this is the dominant area for warm water, upward motion, and that leads to a lot of interesting weather phenomena happening, including westerly winds kind of going across the tropics, and sinking air, dry air through this region. Even though, if we go back and look just 2 months ago, check out how much the Atlantic has warmed. This is June the 15th. And now let's fast forward to today. The Atlantic Basin, especially down here in the main development region, really warmed up compared to where it was. And I think maybe a little bit more than the forecast experts were thinking. Will that have a bearing on the rest of the hurricane season? We'll see. I do think, though, that this very warm Pacific, compared to what we have here in the Atlantic, will mean that the Pacific stays the dominant area for development for the rest of the season. In the Gulf of Mexico, sea surface temperature is very warm. Pretty much everything that you see here is 86, 87, even in some cases almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface, and even warm water extending fairly deep below by several dozen meters, also meaning that there's a lot of heat content in the Gulf. The Western Atlantic very warm as well. Hard to believe, up here off the coast of Cape Cod just a few months ago, frozen, slushy ocean waves were rolling in, and now just a couple hundred miles to the south, 80-plus degree water. Amazing. So where are we headed? Well, the peak of the season coming up here September the 10th. We have a ways to go, climatologically speaking, and this would be for a normal hurricane season, but this year things are kind of different. We have the El Nino in the Pacific, the very warm North Pacific as a whole, and the Atlantic Basin with some pretty dry air down in the deep tropics. So we might not have the exact distribution that we see here. We'll see, but I still think, though, that September will be our busiest month, mainly because it climatologically normally would be. And so any activity that we do see going forward will be most likely towards the end of this month and then throughout the month of September. So as we look at the Atlantic, we do have Invest area 96L sitting out here. 70% chance of this developing over the next 5 days, although I'm going to argue that it's not going to develop because we have a very strong intrusion of Saharan air coming off of Africa. Pretty moist down here to the south of that, but I think this very dominant feature will overwhelm this sort of weak tropical wave and kind of smother it, if you will, acting like a cap, very much like in Tornado Alley. When the atmosphere gets capped, warm layer of air over the unstable air below, and it really doesn't allow the air to rise. And I think that's a big issue out here. You can actually see that dust here on the visible satellite shot right in here. This is 96L, and it's limited in its convection, especially on the northern side. And that's a sign that it's not doing very well despite its low latitude. I think it will continue to move off to the west and west-northwest, maybe bringing some rain to the islands, which will be welcome. But I believe this dust and dry pattern will kind of follow it, and we'll see. I don't think it's going to develop much at all, even though several of the computer models are very aggressive here, bringing it up to hurricane intensity over the next few days. The global model, one of them anyway, the GFS, doesn't see that at all, not even making it a tropical storm. And for what it's worth, the European 51-member ensemble group of different models run with different variables of the Euro, none of them, big fat zero, developed 96L. In the Pacific, we have Tropical Depression 11E. Luckily, it's far enough away from California over here that it is probably going to stay a depression and never amount to much. In the Western Pacific, check this out. We have Typhoon Atsani and then Typhoon Goni. Hopefully I'm saying those correctly. Way over here in the Western Pacific. Goni here could threaten Taiwan over the next several days. It's something that they definitely don't need after dealing with a typhoon very recently that brought devastating rainfall, and that bizarre tornado that we saw video of on social media. A pair of typhoons here in the western Pacific at Sani and Goni here, something to watch over the next several days. And you can do so right there in your app. Hurricane Pro in HD has global tropical cyclone tracking, so you can keep up with everything I just talked about. Even the dissipation, I think, eventually of 96L. All right, well, that's it for me for today. You're up to date on what's happening in the tropics. I'll have another update here about midweek as things progress, so check out the latest video blog coming on Wednesday. Until then, have a great rest of your Monday. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com and, of course, Hurricane Pro and HD. I'll talk to you again on Wednesday.